Hi, you might have noticed that I've been offering access consciousness facelifts and the bars, and I've been getting lots of questions asking, well, what are they? Because you've got no idea, and 6 months ago I didn't either. So I wanted to make this video to tell you a little bit about the bars, to tell you why I love the bars and how it's changing my life. So last year I lost my little sister. It wasn't something I dealt with very well, but how do you deal with something like that? I took some time off work. I spent some time in hospital and I really got stuck in grief. And my grief was tangled in a million other things, but I didn't know how to get out of that space. Everything was difficult. I couldn't handle day to day and it was only getting worse. So I saw an ad for a grief workshop in town and I didn't know what that would be like. It had the tagline Access Consciousness, which I'd never heard of before, but I knew I needed help, so I went. And I met a lady there called Fiona. I was a mess. I was crying, trying to talk, trying to get anything other than tears, but there I was, and the lady running the workshop asked Fiona if she'd run my bars. And I had no idea what that meant. Fiona was lovely. She asked if it was okay, and I said yes. I had nothing to lose at that point, but she put her fingers on the back of my head, which I later discovered was my implant band, and she just sat there. When I left that night, nothing miraculous had happened. I was still upset. I was still grieving. I was still unsure about where to go next. But something had changed, something had shifted, and all of a sudden I had space to see where I was at, where I was choosing, and to consider that maybe I could choose something else, that maybe I could find my way out of the grief, to stop feeling guilty about my sister and my students and about everything really. And that maybe I could choose to be happy again, which ultimately is what I wanted. That was what I was asking for. So when I went home, I sent Fee a message and she called me back. I was able to ask some questions and she asked me some questions which I didn't have the answers for, but just asking the questions had me thinking about other things other than the grief, and that was huge. She offered to teach me the bars, a one-day workshop with her, and I didn't know what it would cost. I wasn't working, so whatever it cost, I felt guilty about making that choice and choosing that when I couldn't even go to work, but I knew I had to do it. Fee asked what would it take for you to come and spend the day with me and learn the bars. And I didn't know. I didn't know what it would take, but whatever it took, I had to do it and I would make it happen. I said yes. I made that choice. I knew I would do it no matter what, and I hung up. The next day I got a call from my employer saying that I had been underpaid for 5 years. I didn't know what that meant. I was having a bad day. The lady on the phone seemed so blasé about the whole thing, but I gave her my details and she said she'd fix it up. So that was it. And the next 2 weeks I went about my business, not very well, but excited about the bars. And for so long I hadn't felt excited. I'd felt sad and guilty and angry and upset, but excited was fun, so I went with it. And the day before I left, I received $30,000. I still can't comprehend how that happened exactly when I needed it to happen, but I asked what it would take and that showed up. So I couldn't ignore that. The one-day workshop learning the bars, was one day of a possible 5 days, which until that point hadn't been possible because I didn't have the money. I wasn't working, but all of a sudden I could choose that. And when my husband dropped me off at Mount Walsh Bush Retreat, he knew I wasn't coming home. I didn't have anything with me. I didn't have any spare clothes, and he drove all the way home and back, which was 3 hours, to bring me things, which I'm so grateful for. And I'm so grateful to have chosen to stay those 5 days, because honestly, they were the best 5 days of my life. And they didn't feel like it at the time. I spent 5 days a mess, but I left those 5 days having learnt the bars and foundation and level 1 of access consciousness. And I left choosing different already. I left having made a choice for myself to choose for myself, which was huge. Until that point, I'd been choosing for everyone else, and that wasn't working. But all of a sudden, I had decided that whatever it took, whatever I had to do, whatever had to change, I would change it because I wanted something different. And I could do that. I could do whatever I wanted to if I just chose. And I knew that. So I came home and I continued using the tools. I continued asking questions, and my whole world has changed. If you know me, you'll know what that means. But everything is changing, and it's exciting. It's amazing. And it all started with the bars. So what are the bars? The bars are incredible. They're 32 points on your head, and each of those points correlates to a different aspect of your life. So joy, sadness, money, creativity, control, everything. And you lay there and relax while I gently touch those points. And by touching those points, we get rid of the junk. So anything you're holding onto energetically from this life or another life or any time or space, we get rid of the stuff you don't need. And all of a sudden, you've got more space to choose something else, to choose to be you. And the things that show up when you can do that are, I can't even start to explain what's happened for me, but every session is different. I generally fall asleep, but it's the best sleep I ever have, and I've cried, I have talked and laughed for the entire hour, but I always feel better after I've had my bars run. I always feel clearer. I always feel more myself and more allowing of what being myself really means. Free of the judgment and expectations and conclusions I was jumping to before I knew I'd jumped to them. It's incredible, really. But if nothing else, you get to relax for an hour, knowing that for that hour you chose you. And if nothing else, choosing me has changed my entire reality. And it's changing things for everybody else too. Because really, what if choosing you and being you is exactly what this reality and what everybody else needs? What if by choosing you, you could give others the possibility to do the same? And how does it get any better than that? Get your bars run.